If you are filing a green card application for your spouse, the last thing you want is to get a request for evidence because that typically means your case is going to be on hold until you send that in. So let's talk about things you can do to avoid the most common reasons that a request for evidence is sent in a marriage-based green card process. I am U.S. immigration attorney Lilian, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenship for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. What is a request for evidence? Why is it even sent? Well, USCIS, when they're processing your case, they're looking at what documents you sent in, what forms you sent in, and they're just checking off a list before it gets to the final officer that makes a decision on the case. Now, if they're checking off their list and they see that there's a certain document missing or there's a part of the form that wasn't filled out correctly or completely, they will send you a request for evidence that basically asks you for certain documents or information in order for them to properly process your application. In most situations, this will put a hold on your application. They will not be able to make a decision on your case until they receive that response from you. The first thing you want to do when you get a request for evidence is look for the deadline. Every single request for evidence has a deadline, the date that they want that response to be given to them by. Okay, you can send it before that date, but they must receive it by that date. If they do not receive it by that date, they can decide to deny your application or to say that you abandoned your application. So it's really important that if you get a request for evidence that you respond to it within the time frame given so that USCIS can go ahead and start processing your application and you do not have to file a motion for them to reopen it or to start the whole process all over again. The three most common reasons that an RFE request for evidence is sent during the green card application based on marriage is medical exam, the form I-693, evidence of the relationship, and form I-864, the affidavit of support being insufficient. We'll go through these one at a time. Let's start with the medical exam report. Typically, when you file your green card application, you do not need to include the I-693 for the medical exam. However, USCIS can send you a request for evidence asking for it. So then you will go ahead and complete your medical exam and send that sealed envelope with the request for evidence paperwork to USCIS. The request for evidence will have the address where the medical exam plus the letter needs to be sent to. If you get a request for evidence for a medical exam report, specifically form I-693, you want to make sure that you go ahead and schedule that appointment with a certified physician. If you go on the USCIS website and you search for a doctor, it will give you the list of doctors in your area by your zip code that are authorized by USCIS to actually complete the medical exam. Once you complete the medical exam and you get it in a sealed envelope from the physician, you'll go ahead and include that with the letter from USCIS and send it down. If you want to avoid getting this particular RFE, you can just go ahead and complete your medical exam and send it in with your initial green card application. Because remember, your green card application cannot be approved unless you have the medical exam report. So you can either send it in with your application or wait for a request for evidence from USCIS. Either way, you're going to need the medical exam report. So to avoid having an RFE and freaking out over it, go ahead and complete your medical exam and send that in with your initial application. The next RFE is for evidence of the relationship. Typically, when an office is reviewing your case, they may notice that they need more documents of the relationship of the marriage before they can actually make a decision on it. When that is the situation, the officer will send you a request for evidence asking you for more documentation of your marriage. If you filed your application with not a lot of documentation, expect either an RFE or an interview notice. If you get this request for evidence, you want to make sure that you are putting together every single thing that you can about your relationship, whether it's pictures, text messages, joint bank account, joint lease, joint mortgage, whatever it is you have together, that you are outwardly telling the world that this is my spouse. You want to include that because you want to make sure that once the officer gets that packet from you that has all the documentation of your relationship, they can actually go ahead and approve it and not schedule you for an interview. If they feel they don't have enough, even after you sending in the request for evidence, they will go ahead and schedule you for an interview. So don't think that just because you don't have a lot of documentation to respond to the request for evidence, that the officer is just going to go ahead and deny your case. No, the officer is now going to schedule you for an interview. At the interview, the officer will ask you questions to get more information about yourself, your relationship, and gauge whether your marriage is real. And then the officer will be able to make that final decision. So just know when you get that request for evidence of your marital relationship, you want to include as many things, even obscure things, as possible. So we have included Netflix subscriptions. Okay. We have included Amazon subscriptions. We have included Sam's Club, Costco subscription. Like, you want to include every single thing that you are telling the world, this is my spouse. You want to include, if you are telling your doctor that you are married, you can include that. If your spouse is your emergency contact with your job, with your providers, you want to make sure that you're getting those documents and including it. Again, you want to give the officer so many documents, so many things that proves your relationship, that shows you outwardly telling the world that this is my spouse, that the officer has no choice but to approve your case. With the same token, you don't want to include unnecessary and irrelevant information. So you don't want to include documentation that just has one spouse on it, right? Because again, they're trying to find out if you are jointly living together, jointly building a life together, jointly, doing things together. So when it's just, okay, I have health insurance over here and my spouse has health insurance over here, that doesn't really help your case. So you only want to include things that help to show your relationship. The third thing that people get a request for evidence for a lot is the affidavit of support, the form I-864, being insufficient. So this basically means USCIS has looked at your form, looked at your tax returns, and determined that the income is not enough to meet the requirements. Again, how can you avoid this? Before you even file, you want to look at what is the threshold USCIS has for my household size. You want to make sure that your income meets that threshold. When it comes to showing income for the affidavit of support, it's supposed to be your current income, but USCIS will typically use your total income from your past year's tax return to see if you have enough income. So if you're looking at your tax returns and you see that your income does not meet the income requirement for the affidavit of support, you want to address that on the front end. Okay, you want to make sure that you are getting a joint sponsor to go ahead and join you and include their income for the affidavit of support. If you have received the request for evidence already, what you want to do at that point is you want to go ahead and see if you can get a joint sponsor, see if you have assets that are enough to make up 3 times the difference between your income and the required income. Your assets needs to be 3 times the difference between the income that you had and the required income that USCIS is asking for. If your assets meet the requirement, you can include documentation of your assets. Your car can only be an asset if you have more than one car. If you only have one car, it is not an asset for this purpose. If you want to use your house as the asset, you need to have your mortgage statement and a recent valuation for the home to see what is the equity in the home. The equity is the asset, not the property itself. So you really want to make sure that whatever it is that you are using to show your income or asset, that you are documenting it. If you are self-employed, this is really, really difficult. You are going to have a harder time if you're self-employed and you're not paying yourself like a W-2 wage. You're going to have a harder time with this. So typically on your Schedule C, you'll see the income, you'll see all your expenses, including depreciation and all of that. But the total income that comes out on 1040 is all that USCIS cares about. They don't care about your Schedule C. They only care about the total income reported on the Form 1040 of the tax return. So you want to make sure that your income, again, meets that requirement. Not your Schedule C, but your Form 1040 total income. All right. This is an issue, like I said, with people that are self employed, because you use your Schedule C, you take all these deductions, and then by the time it gets to your 1040, you already have additional deductions that reduce it even more. So you want to make sure that you are actually properly reporting your income and you're paying attention to your 1040 total income versus your Schedule C profits. If you get a request for evidence for something other than the three things I've talked about, here's a practical guide of how you can effectively respond to this. First, you want to read and understand the request for evidence. You want to understand every single line, what they're asking for, because sometimes they will ask for multiple things in one RFE. You want to start getting together documentation for each thing that they're asking for. All right. You should be making a list of each thing and what documents you can provide for each request. And then you want to make sure that you are addressing every single concern. Again, make that list, put a list of documents that you can provide to show each thing. So, for example, if you get a request for evidence saying that your birth certificate was late registered, so they want more documentation from when you were younger, baptismal certificate, all those things, well, you can start gathering those information. Getting documents that are from when you are an adult is not going to be as helpful as when you were younger. So you also want to make sure that whatever document you're using to respond to each one actually answers the question, the underlying issue that USCIS has. If you get an RFE and it's just too much, you cannot handle it, you do not want to deal with it, you just do not even know where to start, please stop and get some legal help. Reach out to an immigration lawyer, schedule a consultation, get the information you need, hire the lawyer, and have them give you the checklist of what you can use to respond to each of those things so that you are not responding with documents that do not help your case, okay? A request for evidence, when it's not responded to or the information they're requesting is not given, can lead to an application being denied. And then once you get everything together with your lawyer or by yourself, you want to make sure that every single thing is documented, that you're keeping a copy of it, and that you are checking all the responses that you're given for accuracy, and that you are, again, keeping a copy of it for your records. Finally, you want to make sure that you are sending it with tracking. Do not send documents to USCIS by first class mail with zero tracking. because there's no way for you to prove that you actually sent it if you do not have tracking on it. And there's no way for you to know that it actually was delivered unless you have tracking and you can log in and see where your document is at all times. If you are in a situation where you received a request for evidence, or you want to give yourself all the advantages so that you do not end up with a request for evidence that's going to delay your case, well, go ahead and schedule a strategy session with me so that I can tell you what steps you can take, how we can work together to get you to your immigration goals. You can do that by going to my website, lillylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788.